Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. Today we're going to take a look at the contributions that elders, shall we say, senior citizens can make as they move forward in their societies. My guest is an expert in this area. John Orian is a futurist and creator of the PlayAtCreation concept. John, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Thank you, Bill. I'm very happy to be here.
I appreciate you being with me today. We're going to get into talking about, I don't know if we call them senior citizens, elders. There's so many different titles, it's hard to say, but we'll get into that in a few minutes. But let's talk about the concept, the PlayAtCreation concept. What exactly is that?
Well, PlayAtCreation is my venture for the next few decades of time. And it summarizes my belief about why we are here on Earth. Strictly to play and to create. And that frees you up to do so many things. So PlayAtCreation, it's what I'm trying to encourage boomers to do, is to create ventures and to treat them as our primary games for the second half of our lives.
Wonderful. Now you've got, I think, incorporated in this, you have three concepts of dream, design, and create. How could you give me an example of one of those?
Sure.
Briefly?
Okay. So PlayAtCreation is the venture, is the wrapper, if you want. And over the last few years, I've come up with a program to make that happen for people, which is called the Prosperous Modern Elder Program. Within that program are these three courses of dream, design, and create. The purpose of dream, the first one, is to very deliberately choose the purpose you want to serve and the experiences you want to have going forward. It's creating that vision that you can keep your mind focused on. That's something that's going to attract you. Forget about all the stuff that happened before. Where are you going? Okay, so that's the dream part of it, choosing deliberately. The second part is design. And having chosen the experiences you want to have, we help people come up with the venture or ventures that are going to give them those experiences. And then the design piece, we use things like the business model canvas or the lean venture canvas, the social venture canvas, all the same kinds of things to design the venture, the adventure that people will bring to life. Now, these are not 25, 50-page business plans. You've got it on one page. Who are you going to serve? What problems are you going to help them overcome? What's your unique offering? Who are you going to work with? Those kinds of things. So that's the design piece. And then the last piece is create, which takes the longest. This is when you actually bring it to life. So knowing what you want to actually create, having come up with a plan, you then take action, decisive action, to make it happen. Okay, so dream, design, create, right, so that you can become the prosperous modern elder that you were intended to be.
That's what we hope for. That's what we strive for. And of course, our viewers can go to your website at playatcreation.com to get more information on this. We're talking about elders. How you've sort of defined this now to this point, but we hear so many different terms: senior citizens, mature members of the society, elders. How do you, where did the term elder come from?
Okay, actually, I don't know if you know the name Chip Conley. He wrote a book called Wisdom at Work: The Making of a Modern Elder. Chip ran a string of boutique hotels, and then he was an advisor to Airbnb. And I really liked his term of the modern elder. In fact, he's got I'm not sure what to call it, but the Modern Elder Academy down in Baja. You may want to actually have him on the show. So I reached out to him. I said, hey, I really like the term modern elder. May I use it, please? And he said, yeah, go ahead. So when I created Prosperous Modern Elder, that's where I got it from. And if I may, I'll read an excerpt from his little book. He says, being a modern elder is all about reciprocity, giving and receiving, teaching and learning, speaking and listening. Everyone gets older, but not everyone gets elder. So this idea of embracing our roles as a modern elder, it used to be in the tribes, being older, being the elder, was you were really revered because you held the knowledge of the tribe. And as circumstances changed, as events happened, you knew how you dealt with those in the past. We, as modern elders, um, we can't quite take everything that happened before and say, hey, this is what we did before, because things are changing so dramatically. The stuff that Rick Smear talks about in Communities of the Future, anticipating emerging trends, that's what we as modern elders need to do. Look at those trends that are coming, see how they're different than what happened before, and say, okay, this is what we tried before. That won't work. We need to do this. Okay, and this whole idea of embracing our roles as modern elders, I say to people that this generation has an opportunity and almost a responsibility of defining what the new post-COVID normal is going to be. It's an amazing time to be alive.
Yeah, it certainly is for many reasons. You're absolutely
Yep.
right. Well, it reminds me, and you mentioned a moment ago about trends, and we'll get into the communities of the future that, well, communities of the future for communities that don't exist yet. And we'll
Mhm.
talk about that a little more. But what are some of the emerging trends that you've discovered as you've gotten into this, especially since COVID-19? We'll never go back to January 1, 2020. It will just
That's
never go
right.
back to that. But what are some of
In
the emerging
fact,
trends? Please, yes, go right ahead.
uh, so the first trend, which hasn't changed because of COVID, is this trend to vibrant longevity. When I started PlayAtCreation, I was telling people, 5 years ago, if you're 60 to 65, you should expect to live to 100. Okay, and not a feeble 100. You mentioned this before. There's so many uh, biomedical breakthroughs, new medicines. In fact, see what's happened with just the vaccine against COVID. In 1 year, we've got a vaccine. Now, this trend to people living longer and more vibrantly is something that existed before. Okay. The other trends that I was watching, and I was actually looking at these things and expecting them to change our society over the next 10 or 15 years. Things like digitizing everything, governments getting into more and more debt, vibrant longevity for individuals. And what's happened with COVID is it took these trends that I expected to run over 10 or 15 years and collapsed them into a step change. So we were here, going on this kind of a flow, and all of a sudden, boom, we're up here now, and it's here. Even the things like working from home. I talk about digitizing everything. So working from home was something that people were starting to accept more and more and more. But because of COVID, organizations had to accept it now. And so work from home is now a thing. And from home doesn't need to be in the same city. It can be in a smaller town just outside. It doesn't need to be in the same country. I could be working in Costa Rica. We've talked about this before. Where we've got wired internet down into the intentional community in Costa Rica. We could be working from there in Calgary. In fact, I actually did that a few years ago, but we'll get into that another time.
Exactly right. But you're absolutely right. This COVID has created a whole new situation where we find that people who would go to the office perhaps every day might commute 2 hours, sit in traffic for an hour of that 2 hour trip
Can you
over, that
imagine
type of
that?
thing. It's a different world today, and this is going to it's going to resound. It's going to reverberate through the rental market, the real estate market in the cities, through the housing market around, well, every country in the world probably will be affected to some degree, to
Absolutely.
the GDP in the different countries. And you mentioned the debt. We've had a real bout with that in the United States. We've had a situation where a few years ago where the debt was run up dramatically by giving tax cuts, mostly to rich people and to corporations that many people decided didn't need them. And now we're in the middle of, well, hopefully coming out of this COVID-19 disaster, and the government is looking to spend trillions of dollars to try to help people, to provide assistance to people so that they're not thrown into the streets. They don't die
Mhm.
from hunger. They have sufficient food. They have shelter, that type of thing. So we were really in a real quandary there. We see the debt, the national debt going up, but for totally different reasons.
And significantly, and it's not just the United States,
Right.
it's every
This is
sovereign
world.
state has
That's
to
right.
do this. You know, I'm in Canada, we're doing the same thing, probably proportionally higher than in the States. But every sovereign state is bankrupt. We're never going to pay this back,
Mhm.
right? So there is something coming. Don't know what it's going to look like, but governments are not going to be able to pay back all of the money that they borrowed. So what does that mean for us? You know, what does it mean for me who gets, Canada pension, for instance, um, when the government can't afford to pay that, when our kids can't afford to carry us, old folks? One of the things I was trying to teach my kids is when boomers say, "Hey, we need to do this and this and this for the retired people," you guys have to say, "No, stop. You cannot have any more." Um, I don't know what's going to happen as a consequence of that, but one of the ways I'm getting ready, and I'm encouraging others to get ready, is to have our own ventures, our ways of providing value to create good stuff in the world, but to get paid for what we do. So even if it's a nonprofit venture, it still needs to be in the black kind of thing. Otherwise, it's not going to continue. But I mean, if we were making like $30,000, $50,000 a year, that takes the place of a pension, a private pension that most of us don't have. Okay, so in fact, the reason I started PlayAtCreation was to address that problem. And when we talk about what people were saying to me, we'll talk some more about that. But I am basically scratching my own itch by creating PlayAtCreation.
It sounds like one that you're enjoying, and it's very
Oh,
important. And we're glad that you're doing it. Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is a privately funded, independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guest. We'd invite our viewers to go to our website at www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to view previous programs. Also, if you're involved with a PBS or community access television station, or perhaps an intra-campus uh, hookup for a university or a high school or whatever it might be, or a podcast, or you just have a computer, you like our shows, and you'd like to share them with other folks, please feel free to do so. Global Connections Television is provided at no cost as a public service to help us better understand international issues and how they impact our lives. Today, we're taking a look at the role primarily of older folks, shall we say, in the society to see what contributions they are making and can make in the future. My guest is an expert in this area. John Orian is a futurist and the creator of the PlayAtCreation concept. John, we're talking about elders. We'll use that term for the moment and move on that as we go a little further. Now, you're talking about the role that they can play. What has been the reaction as you float this idea out to people who have a lifetime of experience? They have many more experiences than maybe someone at 20 or 25 or 30 might be. Do you find that they are much more amenable to this concept? They want to get involved. They want to achieve their self-actualization, whereas maybe they think they haven't in the past.
I'll answer that in a couple of different ways.
Uh-huh.
So the whole PlayAtCreation concept, people love the idea. Just that name, PlayAtCreation. They go, "Oh yeah, I want some of this." The other aspect is embracing our role as elders, and people get that, and it may be because of what it is that I'm trying to do. So the people that I'm reaching out to, in fact, uh, are of that same mindset. They are typically professionals. They've got university degrees. They're still vibrant. 60s to 65, and they go, "Well, I'm not ready to stop. I want to keep doing stuff." In fact, the godfather of my oldest son, he kept working at Imperial for a long time because he was enjoying it so much. He grew into the role of being a coach. at Imperial, bringing younger people along. And that I'm expecting is what's going to happen with many of us. We have so much knowledge and experience. We know where the problems are. We know what needs to be, how they need to be solved. Um, we have contacts around the world. Most of us have money set aside. In fact, we have an abundance of time when we retire, wealth, much more than our parents had, and health. This is the first generation that has the luxury of pursuing purpose, uh, pursuing activities that are, you spoke about becoming self-actualized. Prior, uh, prior to this generation, it used to be only the highest levels of aristocracy that had those same kinds of abundance, that they could do things. They could go and build Versailles. True, would get the country into debt. But we, uh, modern elders, can, in smaller communities at a much smaller scale, do similar things. And in fact, we are self-actualizing. We've taken care of the physiological things that need to be done. We've raised families and so on. Now we're looking at higher levels of, so what do I want to have done? What do I want to play at? And things like, I don't think in terms of legacy. I think of, I've done my life internship. Now I get to play. Now I get to go create stuff. I get to play with people who are like me, happy, positive, and generous people. What a great time to be alive.
It certainly is. And that's a good segue right into a project that you have underway. It's an intentional community, as I recall, you mentioned, and it's in Costa Rica. First off, what is an intentional community, and what are you doing in Costa Rica to develop it? I mean, I can see why you're there. It's a beautiful country, obviously.
Yeah, yeah. And
But
actually,
for
it
other
was
reasons too.
almost a decade ago. I live in Calgary, Alberta, and one January, almost a decade ago, I said to myself, "Why am I here in the cold?" I mean, I was born in India, grew up in the Himalayas, and so I love that kind of country. And it just so happened that around that time, our company bought another company, and I was asking a fella who came with that other company if he knew of anybody in South America, because I wanted to start investigating. He says, "Oh, let me tell you." Like 2 hours later, after I'd asked him the question, he says, "Yeah, we've got this little project in Costa Rica." So we bought into it with the idea that this is going to be one of our games. And so we've got Altos de Antigua and the foothills of Costa Rica, on the hills of Costa Rica, between San Jose, Pacific Coast, a little boutique real estate development. Now, intentional community, people may have heard about co-housing, which came out of Northern Europe. Intentional community is take co-housing and add attention to it. So I've talked about trying to get boomers to create ventures when they retire. The intent of this community is to have globally minded citizens run their ventures, typically going to be online ventures that is serving a global audience from the hills of Costa Rica. So to have a group of 25, 30 households who are doing similar things, so we can collaborate with each other, support each other, and have fun. And we talked earlier about being able to work anywhere in the world, anywhere there's high-speed internet. So we're going to have wired internet down into the business space in the common house, where we will be able to run our global ventures. So that's where I'm going.
That's where you're going. Now, have you reached the point where you obviously you've lined up several people who are involved in this? Have you decided how large it's going to be, how many households there will be, what types of communal areas you will have, whether it's going to be on the order of a commune, a kibbutz, or have you reached that point yet? Or are you still in that
Well,
planning stage, but the initial stages?
yeah, the way this is going to work out. Actually, we started talking about it last year. I started kicking it off last year, and then because of COVID, we said, "Okay, hang on, we aren't going anywhere for a bit." So this year, what I'm trying to do is pull together about 100 people who are intrigued by that concept, and we'll spend a year actually building the community before we even walk on the ground down there. We'll talk about how we want to create this little village, okay? And that's a big part of it. We need to learn how to live in community rather than as individuals. In the West, the Marlboro man, the individual, is really looked up to, and we need to get past that and learn how to make decisions as a community, what works for the community. In fact, part of the whole prosperous modern elder thing is when we are designing stuff, one of the questions we ask is what's going to happen 2 generations down because of what you're doing now. Okay, so this whole idea of intentional community is looking at the village we create, the community that we create, how we want to be together. I expect next year when we're able to travel again, we'll go down and actually put boots on the ground to say, okay, this is where we're going to have the common house. This is where the private homes are going to be. I want to attach a farm to that, a farm in Costa Rica, so that we have assurance of food and things like that.
Now,
does that answer your question, Bill?
yes, it does, pretty much. That's very true. Now, obviously, one of the biggest challenges we confront today is with climate change. A community of your size, you would leave almost no carbon footprint whatsoever.
That's right.
But you will have some input. And of course, Costa Rica has been a model country as far as becoming fossil fuel free and getting off of fossil fuels, which has been very helpful. Costa Rica, Denmark, and a few others. But what type of role do you think you would have, or your community? Let's assume it's up and running in 5 years or whatever, as far as this whole debate, this whole discussion of climate change and what can we do to eliminate it, or at least slow it down. We're not going to eliminate it, but slow it down to where it doesn't destroy planet Earth, or the people on planet Earth, shall we say.
Yeah, that's a good correction, because the planet Earth will continue.
It will continue with or without.
Planet Earth will change.
Right.
So, in fact, where we are in Costa Rica, it's in the hills, so we don't need heating, we don't need cooling. Those for cities cause a lot of the energy consumption. Like here in Calgary, for instance, we have to heat our homes, right? So we have to burn a lot of fossil fuels to do that. In the southern states where it's really hot, you have to have air conditioning. Okay. In Costa Rica, if you live on the coast, you're going to have lots of air conditioning. Okay. Where we are, we won't. The only problem will be for us is if people want to live in Costa Rica where we are, and travel back to their home countries for whatever reason, visiting family and friends, etc. So the flights back and forth will be the highest cost, and we'll have to figure out how do we offset those things. Electric planes, maybe that's coming, but that's in the future.
It is, and the airlines are looking at them right now. They're looking at a variety of ways to reduce their carbon footprint, because they realize that it, first off, could improve their bottom line, which I think most companies are into that. And the second thing is that they realize that something has to be done very quickly. Well, John, in the last couple of minutes we have, what do you see as far as our major challenges? You mentioned we have to get away from that rugged individualistic thinking to more of a communal thought, thinking how we can solve these problems together as opposed to just people striking out on their own. But what do you see as our major challenge as we move forward in this area, in the communities of the future that they're going to be dealing with?
Well, communities of the future is something that Rick started decades ago, trying to identify emerging trends and get communities ready for them. And he's thinking in terms of communities of the size of like 25,000 plus. Where I'm looking at it is right at the individual level, is saying, how do we as individuals prepare for that? And the communities I'm thinking about are going to be like co-housing communities, intentional communities, 25 to 30 households that come together. This other aspect that we have to get to is where we think in terms of the whole globe, rather than the cities or states that we are part of. Okay, that is going, and probably because of COVID, it is going to happen sooner rather than later. but it is something that that we need to overcome. Me, I was born in India, grew up in the tea plantations. I've lived in Calgary now for 40 years, but I don't have a hometown. You know, most people you say, well, where are you from? And they'll give you a home. I don't think in those terms. For me, my neighborhood, in fact, because of COVID, has gone global. I'm every day talking to people across the world. And that's going to happen more and more and more.
It certainly is. And John, you're a citizen of the world. You certainly are. You live in Canada, in Alberta, but you certainly are, as we all are to some degree, without a doubt. But John, Orian, I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
You're very welcome, Bill. Really happy to be here.
Right.
And we can talk again. We can talk so much more about Costa Rica if you want.
Definitely. Okay. Well, thank you. I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us today on Global Connections Television.